$600 million for 2010 and more than $1 billion for 2011 and 2012. Those are the deficit dilemmas facing state lawmakers. Fox 61's Nicole Jacobs took a look at some of the suggestions to ease the pain.
With a multi-billion-dollar projected deficit over the next 2 years, Governor Rell's approach: fix it the cheapest way possible, and that means tapping into the rainy day fund for 2011.
And using that in fiscal year 11 instead of fiscal year 10 allows the governor to save over $200 million in interest costs by issuing the borrowing now as opposed to next year.
Less borrowing now and less to pay back later. But what does that mean for 2012?
Well, this plan will actually help the structural hole that's been identified for 2012. It's been pegged at about $3.8 billion, but part of that hole is based on the debt service that we would have to pay off this borrowing.
The governor's fix-it method entails new sources of revenue coming from, number one, a 7-year plan of issuing bonds and paying them back through funds for energy conservation. Number two, receiving more money from Bradley International Airport. And three, implementing a surcharge on CL&P and United Illuminating bills, which critics already oppose due to investments in clean, renewable energy. Governor Rell says it will take bipartisanship to push her ideas through and accept spending cuts for 2011 instead of spending.
Now, right there alongside lawmakers watching their every move is Associated Press reporter Sue Haig. John Lender from The Current is also continuing his conversation with us. Sue, let's start with you. I mean, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on the budget because we do already, but how far apart are they? I mean, on budget negotiations.
It's tough to say. There's a couple of things going on. Besides the $700 million deficit that they have to come to grips with, there's also this $1.3 billion hole that was originally built into the budget. So they have to decide how to fill both of those things. And the way to fill the $1.3 billion hole, that's what Governor Rell in your piece is trying to come up with a plan to fill. And there's not total agreement on that yet. And regarding the deficit, revenue numbers are actually improving a little bit. We've noticed that since the April 15th tax deadline, actually things are a little bit less worse than we thought they would be. So it might be a little bit easier to get a deal, but we'll see.
But there is some impetus to get it done now, right? Because once the further along that we move, there's this whole other political component that gets added in, right? Because people start to think about elections and what they want to, how they want people to perceive them.
But also they do have a little time, even though the session ends on May 5th, the fiscal year doesn't end until June 30th, and I've seen that happen where they keep working right up until the end of the fiscal year, so it's not do or die. And also, there is still a budget for the next fiscal year in place. It's out of balance, obviously, but you know, they can still maybe muddle through.
Right. John, what else is intriguing you over there at the Capitol?
Oh, I mean, there are a couple of big issues. I mean, one is 9 new judges that the governor wants to appoint, and they got through the Judiciary Committee. The governor very much wants her people put in, especially the budget director, Robert Gennario, and John Danaher, the public safety commissioner. And the Democrats have put them through the committee, but they control both houses of the legislature, and it seems that they are going to hold that vote, the final vote on these judges, until after they can get a budget deal. And, I mean, like Sue was saying, who knows when this is going to end. I mean, the deadline for the end of the session is Wednesday the 5th, but they proved last year that they don't mind procrastinating and playing brinksmanship, and they went all the way through the summer last year, and I wouldn't bet really heavily that they'll be done by midnight on Wednesday the 5th.
Right. I know that the UConn Health Center funding for that and is also a big issue at the Capitol.
It's a huge project where they're talking about totally revamping the Farmington UConn Health Center, expanding the dental school. And it's also kind of complicated because it involves all these other hospitals in the area, and there's some language that needs to get passed that would start all that, putting that into motion. So that's still up in the air. And there's still some other big bills, like there's a jobs bill. Well, actually, there's several jobs bills, I understand. And that's one thing that all the lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, want to make sure that they get out of this session with some kind of a bill that they can say that they created jobs with.
Right. What sorts of successes have you seen them work on so far?
Well, there is a domestic violence bill. I know it's passed the House. It would create a pilot program whereby some repeat domestic violence offenders would be monitored using GPS. But because of the budget situation, there was money in there to keep domestic violence shelters open 24 hours a day. That's been taken out. But I know that's passed along. There's also a bill that's moving its way through that would provide workers' compensation benefits to police officers who use deadly force against a mammal. Now, this sounds kind of weird and familiar. This all has to do with that terrible attack by that chimpanzee in Stanford, and the police officer who shot the animal. He was denied workers' comp benefits for his mental health needs.
Excellent. And finally, we only have a little bit of time, but there's also some work going on extending the statute of limitations for sex abuse victims, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to come up or not, actually. They're still counting the votes, but this has a lot to do with that case involving that Dr. Reardon years and years ago, where they found all those pictures of kids in the wall in West Hartford. And that one, it's still up in the air whether or not they've got the votes.
Excellent. All right. Well, John and Sue, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. We're going to be watching and reading your articles as time goes on. We have a lot to write about. You do. Ahead, social survival skills for autistic children. Dr. Mark Goldenberg from the Brain Balance Center is here to talk about it.